her.
She's the one who shot her.
Restraining order, but she shot her.
The gun in the car. Oh my fucking God!
The baby in the car. How you close to this truck? Get up. You scared as hell, right? Scared as hell. You had it, buddy.
No, it wasn't. You had it right there.
He was trying to stop her in the car, bro. You're trying to hit the car, bro. What are you talking about? You had her in a headlock. And then you shot her, Cody. I was there. I write a statement.
Arrest her. I want her arrested. There's a fucking gun on the street.
The South Loop of Chicago is often busy in the mornings, with parents and children filling the sidewalks. On this particular day, the usual rhythm of the city was interrupted by a sudden act of violence. What began as a normal routine quickly shifted into a moment that no one could predict. Romika Meeks-Blackmon, only 31 years old, became the center of this tragic event. She had completed her role as a mother that morning, escorting her child to school. For her, this was an everyday responsibility. But within minutes, the setting of a school drop-off was transformed into a place of crime and chaos. Eyewitnesses later described the encounter as swift and intense. An argument escalated, leading to physical contact between two women. Those nearby watched as the dispute grew louder and more aggressive. The scene unfolded in full view of families, staff, and children. In the middle of this clash, a firearm was produced. A single bullet was discharged, striking Romika in the face. The shot silenced the argument and created shock across the area. The sound of sirens soon followed as emergency responders rushed to the scene. Romika was transported to Stroger Hospital, where attempts were made to save her life. Despite the efforts of medical staff, her injuries were too severe. She was pronounced dead not long after her arrival. The woman believed to be responsible was quickly taken into police custody. Authorities later confirmed that this was not a random act, but one connected to a personal dispute. The event revealed how private tensions, when carried into public spaces, can result in irreversible outcomes. The impact stretched beyond the immediate moment. A mother's life ended in daylight. A community witnessed an event that would leave lasting memories. And an ordinary morning in the city became the setting of a story that highlights how quickly circumstances can turn from routine to tragic. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment below. Where are you tuning in from? What are your thoughts as this story unfolds? Your voice matters. These are real people, real tragedies, and real lessons we can't ignore. Share this video with someone you care about. It could make all the difference. Welcome to Unseen Crime Dossiers, your home for spine-chilling cases, haunting before mysteries, and deep dives into the world of crime. From jaw-dropping real-life events to groundbreaking forensic discoveries, we're here to uncover the truth behind the most gripping investigations. Step inside, examine the evidence, and lose yourself in the shadows of true crime. Romika Meeks-Blackmon was a young woman whose life centered around her role as a mother. At only 31 years old, she was already responsible for shaping the future of her child. Her days often revolved around family, responsibility, and making sure her loved ones were cared for. She was known to those around her as someone who balanced her personal life with her duties as a parent. People close to her recall her presence as consistent, dependable, and strong. She carried herself with the quiet determination of someone focused on providing stability in a world that can be unpredictable. Her home life reflected the values she held. Romika made sure her child was always guided, always supported, and never left without care. Friends and relatives knew that her dedication to motherhood was not just a role, but a central part of her identity. Beyond family, Romika was a part of her community in Chicago. She lived her life among familiar faces and neighborhoods where people recognized her. The connection she built showed her as more than just another resident, but as someone who belonged to a network of family, neighbors, and friends. She also carried the weight of personal goals and dreams. Like many young women her age, she had aspirations that stretched beyond the daily routine. Her story was still being written, and she had years ahead of her to shape her path. Those years were cut short. The people left behind remember her as more than a victim. To them, she was a daughter, a mother, and a person with a future. Her presence held meaning in the lives of those she touched. That meaning does not fade with her absence. In telling her story, the memory of Romika is preserved not only in the details of the event, but in the recognition of who she was. A life with promise, interrupted. A name that will not be forgotten by those who knew her and those who have come to hear of her story. The events that led to Romika Meeks-Blackmon's death took place in broad daylight on South State Street. The location, a busy area near a school, became the setting for a confrontation that escalated beyond control. What unfolded there was witnessed by many, leaving a lasting mark on all who saw it. The clash began with verbal exchanges that quickly moved into physical contact. Voices grew louder, movements sharper, and tension filled the space. Onlookers stood frozen, unable to predict how swiftly the encounter would turn violent. During the struggle, one woman reached for a firearm. The appearance of the weapon shifted the atmosphere instantly. What had moments before been a public argument now became a deadly situation. The firearm was discharged, and the shot struck Romika. The noise of the gunshot echoed through the area, and panic spread rapidly. Families hurried away, while others stayed rooted, stunned by the scene before them. The sound of approaching sirens followed within minutes, as first responders moved quickly to secure the location. Police officers arrived and secured the area, ensuring no further harm would occur. Medical personnel moved Romika from the street with urgency, transporting her toward the hospital. The seriousness of the injury was clear, and the atmosphere carried a weight of finality. Law enforcement confirmed that the suspect was placed under custody without delay. The streets that only moments before had been filled with children and parents were now lined with squad cars, flashing lights, and officers gathering details of what had occurred. The incident marked the end of an ordinary morning and the beginning of a criminal investigation. A street that once carried daily routines became a scene of violence, remembered for a life taken in an instant and an act that could not be undone. After the shooting, detectives from Area 3 were assigned to handle the case. They arrived at the scene, carefully documenting evidence and speaking with individuals who had witnessed the confrontation. Each detail was recorded to build a timeline of events that explained how the situation developed. The authorities confirmed that the suspect was a woman known to Romika. This detail supported the early belief that the crime was tied to a personal dispute rather than a random act. Investigators gathered statements, reviewed surveillance footage, and collected physical evidence from the street where the confrontation took place. The suspect was transported to a nearby station for questioning. Officers followed strict procedures, ensuring that the arrest was carried out without further conflict. In custody, the woman faced initial processing, which included documentation of her identity, fingerprints, and official booking. At the same time, police worked with prosecutors to determine potential charges. The seriousness of the case, involving a fatal shooting in public, required careful coordination between departments. Legal teams reviewed the circumstances, considering how to proceed in court. Community members who had been present gave testimony, providing accounts of what they saw and heard. These reports helped investigators piece together how quickly the argument escalated and how it resulted in Romika's death. The information became part of the official case file. Authorities released early statements to the public, describing the event as connected to a domestic conflict. This communication aimed to calm fears of random violence in the neighborhood, while confirming that the investigation was active and ongoing. By the end of the first stage, the case had moved from a street tragedy into the hands of the legal system. With a suspect in custody and evidence collected, the focus turned toward building the case for court proceedings that would determine responsibility and consequences. News of Romika's death traveled quickly, sparking conversations across the city and on social media. Friends, family, and neighbors shared posts online, expressing disbelief that a disagreement had turned into a tragedy. Screens filled with her photos, messages of sorrow, and calls for justice. Local leaders addressed the public, emphasizing the need for peace within the community. They urged people to resolve disputes without violence and highlighted the consequences that came from letting anger control decisions. Their words aimed to remind residents that the incident was not only about two individuals, but also about the broader safety of the neighborhood. Candlelight vigils were organized in memory of Romika. People gathered in silence, holding flowers and lighting candles as a tribute to her life. The gathering provided comfort for those who knew her personally, while also allowing strangers to show their support. Families in the area used the tragedy as a teaching moment. Parents spoke with their children about the dangers of impulsive actions and the lasting impact of violence. Conversations in households shifted toward accountability and the importance of making choices that avoid harm. The event also drew attention from community organizations that work to reduce violence. They offered counseling, outreach programs, and assistance to those affected. Their presence underscored the ongoing efforts to provide resources in neighborhoods often touched by conflict. Local media continued to cover the story, keeping it in public discussion. Reporters spoke to neighbors, community figures, and legal experts, making the case a focus of citywide awareness. The coverage amplified the voices calling for change and added pressure to ensure the case would not be overlooked. In the weeks that followed, the memory of Romika became part of a larger dialogue about prevention and healing. Her story stood as a reminder of how quickly lives could be lost and how communities had to come together to address the root causes of violence. After the shooting, authorities moved quickly to secure the scene and gather evidence. Investigators collected witness statements, reviewed surveillance footage, and pieced together the sequence of events that led to the confrontation. The information they compiled became the foundation of the legal process. The suspect was taken into custody and formally charged. Court documents outlined the accusations in detail, including the use of a firearm and the resulting loss of life. These records provided the first official account of the incident, marking the beginning of what would become a closely followed case. During initial hearings, the courtroom filled with both family members and local residents. Prosecutors presented arguments emphasizing the seriousness of the crime, while the defense focused on building their response. The tension inside reflected the weight of the tragedy that had unfolded outside. As the case advanced, legal teams prepared evidence and testimony for trial. Expert witnesses, forensic specialists, and law enforcement officers were lined up to explain their findings. Every detail, from phone records to video clips, was considered vital to shaping the outcome. Judges maintained strict procedures to ensure fairness throughout the process. Each hearing was documented carefully, with rulings made on what evidence would be admissible. These steps set the stage for a full trial where both sides would present their positions in front of jury. The community followed each development through media updates. News outlets reported on scheduling, legal motions, and statements from officials. The steady flow of information kept the public engaged, as many waited to see whether justice would be served. For Romika's family, the legal proceedings represented a path toward accountability. Every court date marked progress in addressing the events that had taken her life, even as the weight of the loss remained unchanged. When the trial began, it drew significant attention from the city. The courtroom was filled each day, with reporters, family members, and residents occupying the seats. The case had moved beyond a single tragedy, becoming a focal point of public interest and discussion. Prosecutors laid out their evidence methodically. They presented video clips, photographs, and physical items collected at the scene. Witnesses described what they saw and heard in the moments leading up to the gunfire. Their accounts provided a timeline that the jury could follow clearly. The defense countered with arguments designed to lessen the responsibility of the accused. They questioned the reliability of certain testimonies and pointed to gaps in the state's evidence. Their goal was to raise doubts strong enough to weaken the prosecution's case. Expert witnesses provided technical explanations, including ballistics analysis and forensic reports. These details helped clarify the path of the bullet, the type of weapon used, and the conditions under which the shooting occurred. Scientific findings carried significant weight in guiding the jury's understanding. Throughout the proceedings, the judge enforced order and ensured that both sides adhered to established rules. Objections, rulings, and instructions shaped the flow of testimony and arguments. The judge's direction helped maintain a balance between fairness and efficiency. After closing statements, the jury entered deliberations. Hours of discussion were dedicated to reviewing evidence and weighing the credibility of witnesses. Each member was tasked with applying the law to the facts as presented during the trial. Finally, the verdict was delivered. The decision marked the end of the courtroom phase, closing a chapter of legal uncertainty. It was a culmination of weeks of testimony, argument, and examination, bringing clarity to the question of responsibility in the case. Once a verdict was announced, the focus turned to the sentencing phase. This stage determined the consequences for the crime and brought the legal process closer to its conclusion. The courtroom once again became a gathering place for families, attorneys, and members of the community. Prosecutors argued for a sentence that reflected the severity of the act. They highlighted the lasting impact of the crime and urged the court to impose a punishment that matched the weight of the loss. Their statements emphasized accountability and the message it would send to others. The defense sought to present mitigating factors. They spoke about the defendant's background, circumstances, and potential for rehabilitation. By doing so, they attempted to reduce the length and harshness of the penalty the court might impose. Victim impact statements were read aloud, giving family members the opportunity to describe how their lives had changed. These words were recorded in the official record and added a personal dimension to the otherwise formal process. The judge listened carefully before delivering the ruling. Legal guidelines, precedents, and the specifics of the case were considered. The final sentence was announced clearly, leaving no uncertainty about the outcome. Media outlets reported the decision immediately, spreading the news across television, print, and online platforms. The public learned of the sentence within minutes, ensuring that the case continued to hold the city's attention. With sentencing complete, the courtroom phase of the case officially ended. The decision closed a legal process that had stretched over many months, leaving behind a record of proceedings that would be remembered by all who followed it. In the months following conclusion of the case, the community continued to reflect on what had happened. Romika's death was not forgotten, and her story remained present in conversations about safety, justice, and the choices people make. Her family worked to preserve her memory in meaningful ways. They organized events, created memorials, and spoke publicly about the need to prevent similar tragedies. Each effort ensured that her name would remain connected to a message of awareness. Neighborhood organizations expanded programs aimed at reducing violence. Workshops, mentoring initiatives, and outreach activities were launched with the goal of addressing conflicts before they turned deadly. These steps were a direct response to the lessons drawn from the case. Schools in the area adopted discussions about conflict resolution and responsibility into their curriculum. Teachers emphasized respect, communication, and alternatives to aggression. Young people were encouraged to see Romika's story as a warning and an opportunity to choose differently. Local leaders continued to speak on the issue at public forums and meetings. They stressed that accountability was not limited to the courtroom, but extended to how individuals lived within their communities. Their words tied the legacy of the case to broader social responsibilities. Media outlets revisited the story periodically, especially on anniversaries. Articles and broadcasts reminded the public of the events and the changes that followed. This kept the memory alive and reinforced the importance of ongoing dialogue. In the end, the aftermath of Romika's death was marked by a mix of remembrance and reform. Her legacy became one of caution and change, shaping how the community addressed violence and ensuring that her life continued to have meaning beyond its tragic end. Here at Unseen Crime Dossiers, we're driven by a mission to uncover hidden realities, honor forgotten voices, and keep their memories alive. If the story made you pause, reflect, or feel something, there's more coming that will challenge you even deeper. Make sure to hit subscribe, tap the like button, and turn on that notification bell so you never miss a case. We're dropping new episodes regularly. And trust us, what's ahead is even more chilling. Before you go, we want to hear from you. What moment hit you the hardest? Drop it in the comments. Your perspective matters, and your voice helps keep these stories alive. Until next time, stay alert, stay informed, and never stop seeking the truth, because every life deserves to be heard.